Hello, it's the 6th of December, 2015, and this is Unseen Podcast, episode 35. I'm your host, Paul Carr, and with me today are, from left to right in my Hangout screen, Adam Smith.
Hello from the Unseen European.
Yes, I'm glad we got somebody from Europe at this special time. And I believe in Patagonia, Buckfield.
Hello from Unseen South America.
And our new panelist today, we're very happy to have, for the first time in a while, a new panelist. Now, how do we say your name? I'll let you say your name. Jeff
Boerst.
Boerst. Okay.
Yeah.
I should have checked with you on that before we started, but we had a lot of technical problems today.
That's no problem.
And from the exotic wilderness of New Jersey, Patrick Festa.
Hello from the Jersey Shore.
Yeah. By the way, I used to live in New Jersey, Patrick, so, and I really liked it, actually, for the most part. Let's see. So there's a couple things I wanted to talk about before we get underway with today's discussion, which is one thing is Nick Nielsen, who may or may not show up later, has recorded for the WoW Signal, which is the parent podcast of this podcast, a couple of bursts recently. One is on the halos of vanished civilizations, and one is on something called the wilderness hypothesis, which I think we'll be talking about in a near future podcast, which is one of the hypotheses to resolve the Fermi paradox. It's a bit of a variation on the zoo hypothesis. So if you're interested in the Fermi paradox or in SETI or in ancient ET civilizations, all that cool stuff, Nick's done a fair bit of thinking about it, a fair bit of research, and I would definitely recommend that you check those out at wowsignalpodcast.com. And also, just a quick promotion for an organization that I think needs a little help, which is the SETI Institute. I got an email that they are struggling to support their basic SETI mission. They have a lot of grant money to study astrobiology and planetary science, but they don't have much SETI money right now. And as you know, by law, they can't have much SETI money from the government. So I would encourage anyone who's got a few extra bucks they'd like to spread around this season, a little holiday cheer towards the SETI Institute. There'll be a link in the show notes. But just go to SETI.org, and how you can contribute is right there at the top. Just send them a few bucks, a little bit of love for the holidays. And also, I would like to point out that I recently posted on our blog at unseenpodcast.com a short little essay on what it will take to keep this podcast going into the indefinite future. Sometime in spring, we will announce, that we are continuing or not continuing. I expect we will continue, but I wanted to be very open about the criteria on what that decision will be based upon and how you, the listener, can help. And I'm not asking for very much, but a little bit of your time, maybe a little bit of your hard-earned cash, could help keep this podcast going on into the indefinite future, without advertising, without all these annoying promotional announcements. So let's get started. That's enough for now. I'll give you more information at the end of the show. As you know, every time we plan an episode, about 3 or 4 weeks in advance, we open on Google Plus what is called the topics thread. And the topics thread is for people who either are participating or not participating. Anybody in the community can pitch in on what we'd like to talk about in that episode. Unless we have an unusual case where we have a special guest, then it'll be more like questions for our guest. But we haven't had a guest in a while, although I believe Mateusz is working on one, and I hope that will be announced soon. But this one, we seem to be steering towards a very hot topic these days, one that we kind of touched on in episode 3 and have also touched on in a few other episodes, which is the accelerating intelligence of our machines. Nobody has built an artificial general intelligence yet, but they have hit several of the milestones that were once thought to be evidence that we would have achieved general intelligence. For example, we have a machine that can beat a grandmaster in chess. We have cars that can drive themselves. We have a lot of what goes on in the cockpit of an airplane now is automatic or autonomous. Although the pilot's still there, people are planning aircraft in the future that would not have pilots. And there are, as you know, a lot of autonomous unmanned aerial vehicles, which right now have pilots, but are getting increasingly autonomous. Autonomous submarines are coming. You can buy a little vacuum cleaner that goes all around your house by itself and goes around obstacles. None of these machines has what we would call artificial general intelligence. So I don't know. What questions do you guys have about that? What concerns? What hopes?
Can you start off, Paul, by just explaining what artificial general intelligence means, perhaps?
Sure. And I think you'll find a few different definitions out there. To my definition is that it would have the cognitive capabilities of an adult human, or better. Now, it could hold a conversation with you. It could perform a very complex task. It could do your job in principle, especially if your job is more of a cognitive knowledge type job. It could play a game that chess. Play a game without being a specialized engine for that game. They could learn Go or chess or poker, and the concern a lot of people have is that, as Nick Bostrom says, the train won't stop at Humanville Station. It won't stop at being as smart as person. It will move on from there very quickly. In fact, Bostrom says it'll swoosh right through there without stopping, and very quickly be smarter than us. And not only smarter, but in some senses more creative, more able to solve problems, more able to invent things. Not everybody believes that's possible. Not everybody believes that's going to happen soon. But the numbers the experts usually come up with is around 2040, 2050. 2040 is not that far off. I might live to see that. If I live as long as my dad did, I will live to see 2040. So, and there's good reason to believe I'll live quite a bit longer than my dad. That's kind of where we are.
Something I thought was really interesting when I was hearing some of Bostrom's videos, that he said, from what his point of view is anyway, once we get to the quote unquote village idiot level, then the Einstein level could be like days after that.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, because village idiot. We elect those people to office all the time. We can't even tell that they're not. I want to point out that I had a computer science professor once in graduate school who asked me the question that I've never been able to answer, which is, why would anybody want to build a computer as dumb as a human? With all our biases and perceptual and cognitive blind spots. But really the difference between being a village idiot and Einstein isn't anything physical, right? I mean, it's a little bit of different wiring in the brain.
I think it's more than that, though. I got a tablet that'll beat some grandmasters in chess because the programming is proper. It's not. I don't think it's a matter of building smarter. It's a matter of, I guess, the old sci-fi word, self-awareness. In other words, can this machine, using the mechanical input devices, whether it be cameras, microphones, and or other sensory devices, can it look at the environment and learn something? Can it go outside, like the Roomba, for example? Can it go out there and pick up that dirt and look at it and say, this is strange. What is this? In other words, can it ask questions? If it does that, then it's self-aware. But as far as building a machine, we have computers that'll, without computers, we couldn't do all the computational abilities and things like that. It's not just that it's a calculator, but it's able to do all these things much better than we can anyway. But it's not a matter of how well it does these things. It's a matter of being able to be to learn just by looking at something. I pick this charger up and I look at it and I say, oh, I know what this is. This is a part of my smoking device battery charger. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it may not be able to do anything smart or fantastic, but if it's able to learn and be self-aware, that's where actual intelligence, artificial intelligence comes from.
Well, I mean, what do you think that's something that only biological entities can have, or?
While you were talking, I was thinking about that very question, and I have a funny feeling it is. I have a funny feeling that once it becomes alive, it becomes, in other words, it almost seems like it'd be a stupid computer, but yet if it's able to do something like we don't have a perfect memory. Well, there are some people, but our biological system doesn't remember things like a computer chip, but it's able to learn. Whereas the computer, you punch the button and it's in there, and it either makes that file or it doesn't, as long as the memory chip or the hard drive is able to continue that recording or whatever. So it's a bit different. It's not a hard memory. It's more of a fluctuating thing.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, well, oh, there's Adam. Adam's back again. Okay. So
This is... Sorry.
Now you mentioned, Patrick, that you have a machine that plays at a high level of chess, but that's very highly specialized. That's what we would call narrow AI, right? Likewise, the Google cars are narrow, but it looks to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that human intelligence evolved as a set of narrow capabilities that sort of slowly over time became integrated in a kind of kludgy way. Because after all, our brains evolved from chimps only in
but see, the
few million years.
We're alive, so synapses get made and memories get in. It's a biological thing. It's fluctuating. This tablet of mine, which costs like $100 at Walmart, I have like 4 different chess programs in it, and one of them is better than the other. But all of them are capable of playing, beating me in chess if I put it on a higher level. But the point is that it's hardwired that way. It's programmed that way. The engine is.
Well, no, I mean, but the software in there is not hardwired, right? It can.
I mean, it's hard.
It doesn't learn, is what you're saying.
It's hard programmed. It was inputted. The design. It was designed that way.
Maybe there's something about having an organic computer, so to speak, that makes it more organic, more fluid, like you're saying, Patrick. Is that kind of where you're going with that? Just because it can change and rewire itself on a dime almost.
Yeah, but we can do that with a neural network. An artificial neural network. You can, and this has been research has been going on since the 70s. And actually even before that, with an artificial neural network, which you can simulate in software, there's a lot of different open source and closed source packages out there that can do it. You can set up a network that can learn something. Now, that's not the easiest thing in the world to actually get working well, but people are getting a lot more sophisticated at it now. And of course, computers are a lot faster. You can build it in hardware, or you can build it in software, or some hybrid of the two. And it can prune. You can prune the network. You can grow the network. You can add a neuron or subtract one. it's very, very far from a simulation of a real living biological net, but it can learn. It can learn and essentially store in its weighting matrix pattern recognition. Now, and very complex patterns in time, patterns in space, patterns, any kind of pattern you want to mention. We certainly have some capability for that in our minds, but is there something else that we have that you think will never be achieved by machines?
I would never.
We have,
But I think we're probably further than 2040.
Go ahead, Adam.
we have ingenuity, we have hopes, fears. We're not logical in the same way that a computer program is. We attack a problem in a completely different way. We have things like rules of thumb and intuition. It's those sorts of things that a computer's and artificial intelligence is going to struggle to emulate.
Oh yeah, people have been thinking about those things for a long time, and they are hard to emulate.
Maybe it is the nuances of emotion that might have a strong underpinning that we just can't duplicate, and is necessary as well in some ways for a higher generalized intelligence.
So, but what is emotion exactly? Is it? It's not something mystical, is it? I mean, it's something real inside us, right?
Yeah, but chemically driven needs, like for fear, like would a machine ever be able to actually experience fear? Arguably one of the most basic emotions that is one of the most contributing factors to where our minds are today, and where, like if we didn't have fear, then we wouldn't, as the old explanation goes, when we were, ancestors walking down one side of the river, the intuition would kick in that maybe there's a lion on the other side, even if it's not necessarily, something we see immediately. Just the subtleties of fear kind of let our brains pick up on things, sense, or maybe a slight rustle in the leaves that we wouldn't have known was there. And maybe that's integral to the evolution of a higher intelligence because of that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, snakes creep me out, right? When I see even a harmless snake, my initial reaction to it is, nope. Now I give myself a few seconds to rationally work through it. I think, okay, that snake is not going to hurt me. That snake does not eat people. It eats mice, or frogs. I'm not its food. I'm not threatening it. And I have been bitten by a snake, by the way, a venomous snake. So I know but that's not why I'm afraid of it. I was afraid of me before then. That's sort of like a natural creepy reaction, right? That we all have. But if you had to sit down and symbolically process it, think, oh, that's a reptile. I've seen those before. Some of them are dangerous. I should avoid it, right? It may be too late. You may already have a couple of puncture marks in your foot. So we have this very quick sort of thing. We can do that with machines, right? We can teach a machine to avoid things that are dangerous to it.
Well, the thing is, it's the unknown. In other words, it's the ignorance that we have to deal with, that we have to look at and learn whether or not it's dangerous, that sort of thing. It's that cracking twig in the middle of the night that, like, you turn your head and you say, what is that? You automatically say, oh, you go through your head, trying to learn what that thing is. Yeah. Whereas just on a machine, you're telling it what it is. So there's a difference between learning it yourself and somebody telling you.
So, but there is something called unsupervised learning that is a big field of research right now. The machines can actually learn from their own experiences without a human telling them that's the correct answer, right?
Well, without the underpinnings though of emotion, like the best way you can learn is to touch a hot stove. Hot, you say to a kid, and then they don't know what hot means, and you can describe it. You can paint them as million pictures as they want, but unless you feel, my fingers are now going to hurt for the next hour and a half or whatever, then it's not as strong and solid of a learning process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my kids insist on learning everything the hard way, right? Will that hurt if I do it? Oh, yes, it does.
Trial and error.
If I pull the cat's tail, will the cat react in some way? You know, or will that make Daddy mad? Let's see if it makes Daddy mad. Oh, yes, it did. You know, yeah. But of course, and babies are masters of unsupervised learning, right? They learn a lot of stuff that we don't teach them. You didn't teach your kid how to walk. Your kid just started walking. Right?
Well, but they have to observe, and and you have to have the desire to learn and the desire to want to walk. Like, for instance, when I learned to walk, the way I was, don't remember it, of course, but the way it was told to me was my mom would always grab my hand and walk me across the room, make a big deal out of it, and be like, "Oh, look, he's walking." Da, 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 da. And then the day that I actually walked by myself, she stood on the other side of the room and kept trying to give me the coaxers to do it. And I just basically, again, as the story goes, stood up, grabbed my own hand, put my hands together as if I was walking myself, and walked across the room. But I had that incentive from her, and the experience that was shown. I had the emotional, I want to be with my mother, but she's over there. How do I solve this problem? So it was an emotional basis in that drive. You see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Well, babies just love to explore anyway, right? I mean, they are constantly looking to get up on things and see what's over the. I mean, it seems like that's just built into you from the time you're a little kid. Even a newborn is moving its arms and hands around. It looks like it's a random way, but they're actually learning how to move.
Yeah, and exactly. You say built into us since we were a kid. Now, would a machine have the capacity to have that kind of thing built into it? I guess is a big question.
Well, that's an area of active research.
I think Jeff is right. It's basically what I'm saying. The emotional thing, just like Data on Star Trek, it's always that he has no emotion, where his brother Lore did, and that sort of thing. It's the iRobot thing. It's I don't know if you've ever, I forgot the author's name, the Kraken Project, where this girl she was working at NASA, and she created this, the Kraken was supposed to be this thing that landed on Titan, and if it sensed danger, it would get out of its own danger, and it ended up that the test that they put on it, the thing escaped the closed circuit and went into the World Wide Web, and it became intelligent, or became self-aware. But that's a long story. But look it up, the Kraken Project. But it's the same idea. In other words, the thing became motion. It became living, and it became had its emotions, because her secret was, well, I don't want to kill the book for you, but the secret was that she made it sleep, because every time they tried it, it would disintegrate itself. But as soon as she programmed the sleep into it, it was able to regenerate its neural paths or something or other.
It looks like that was written by Douglas Preston, just to throw props out to him. And maybe sleep is a really important factor as well. I mean, do we have that kind of, there's arguments as to what dreams are and what sleeping is, but the main thing I hear is that it's a good time for the brain to just sit and kind of process the day's, integrate the day's activities. Is that necessary in a machine? Is that necessary for a higher generalized intelligence?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, we don't even know the way our brains evolved and function, or fail to function sometimes, is at all optimal, right? Just it got us through our evolution, but that's all we know about it.
My brain does not function optimally.
I know mine doesn't.
What I heard was sleep in a biological system, sleep on all animals that we know about. It's a regenerating process. It's the brain actually heals itself, or creates neural paths or whatever. In dreams, of course, or like you said, processes the day's images and whatnot. It could turn them into nightmares, or it could turn them into pleasant dreams. But it's a way for the brain to create neural paths and things like that, and it heal itself and regenerate.
Yeah, and people, at least normal people who don't get sleep, their health declines dramatically. There's a lot of things that go wrong. A
lack of sleep could cause like hallucinations and all sorts of dementia kind of things as well. I mean, it's like it's hardwired. It's a must. There's no getting around it.
Yeah. And as you get older, by the way, it gets a little bit more difficult. I always envy the cats. They seem to just honk out whenever they want. Right? But but the fact is, we humans, right, just 5 million years ago, which in an evolutionary sense is not very long, had much, much smaller brains, but that's when we diverged from the chimps, and it took us about a million years to actually do the divergence from chimps, chimp ancestors, not really so much chimps per se. And, so in that time, that what, 200, 300,000 generations time, we've developed, the cognitive, at least some of us have extremely advanced cognitive abilities. We all know people who are like insanely smart, right? The people who can solve problems that other people aren't even aware exist. So, and those are just our cousins and friends, classmates. They're just us humans. But is there a superhuman level? Do you think that is even meaningful to talk about superhuman intelligence?
Well, there's savants. I mean, they're more specialized, but
Right.
they can, I've heard a story of like two savant twins that would jump up and down on their beds and with glee just throw out 6-digit prime numbers off the top of their head. Would that be considered superhuman, even though it's just a narrow stretch of like either math or music or that they specialize in?
Well, it is in kind of a way, right? I mean, you take the the famous mathematician Ramanujan, who unfortunately died quite young, but he was able to do that sort of thing just 24/7. Throw very, very complicated mathematical facts out that his colleagues would spend a long time checking. And he was obviously some kind of genius. He was, but that might be more like what we would consider narrow AI, right? Really, really good at a narrow range of things.
Yeah, that's what I was basically suggesting. I mean, is it would you be considered superhuman if you were incredibly good at one thing? I mean, that's kind of crippling and empowering at the same time.
I'm not 100%. It strikes me as very strange that we sort of assume humans have this very broad, very flexible intelligence. And when someone says like very broad, the first thing that I reach for is, well, compared to what? I would say our hearing only detects a very narrow range of vibrations. Our visual spectrum is infinitesimally small on the EM spectrum. By any metric you pick of just what we can perceive, not even what we can process, which has got to be a fraction of that. Just in those terms, when I look at objective standards that one might apply, even when we're not sure what basics like time, space, matter, energy, and force are, even when we just stick to like our preconceptions of what these things are, we have a diminishingly small capability relative to even detecting these things. So
But how do we know that, Buck? Wait a minute. How do we know that?
Well, you take the range of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah, but how do we know that range exists? Right?
Sorry?
We can detect it. We create tools that detect it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Then what you're doing is you're attributing artificial abilities to humanity, and I thought this discussion was separating.
Well, no, it's a little different than that. I mean, our tools are kind of what some people might call our extended phenotype, right? Without our ability to do that, we'd be naked and vulnerable to much stronger animals.
But as far as intelligence, it wouldn't affect what we're referring to in this conversation as general intelligence, would it?
Yes, it does. I think it very much does.
Well,
It does.
to answer the
Okay.
question about is there a superhuman, and I think there already is. In other words, there are obviously people smarter than myself. I consider myself smarter than the average bear, but certainly not smarter than either Hawking or Einstein, for example. Probably not even as smart as some of you guys here. But the point is that there are levels, of intelligence, and they overlap each other. There are some areas that are specialized and things like that. But from what I've learned in my 56 some odd years, is that people who are that much more intelligent, they have more neural paths, they have more neurons. Their brain, they've actually done studies of this where you literally can see there are more of these connections in the brain. So in that sense, it has to do with the quality of the energy input. So good nutrition, for example, it's been shown that people who started out life from infancy on with really good nutrition and things of that nature, usually on a general basis, not specifically, but on a general basis, are not just healthier in body but in mind as well. So they are generally smarter or more intelligent or able to do the math and become the scientist, that sort of thing. Which is to say that if we didn't poison ourselves in the last few decades, we might have been all smarter,
But we are getting smarter, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. At the same time, the nutrition is getting better. At the same time, the poisons that we had back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s are leaving. Like there was the lead paint thing, for example. I might have even been a victim of that because I noticed that sometimes I can do things and all of a sudden I can't do them anymore and things like that.
No, that's called aging.
Well, I'm giving an example. Like maybe I was, lead in the water, that sort of thing, because I've lived in some pretty old houses and stuff like that,
Yeah.
So I mean, there are things that the environment stops, the biological systems.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put that towards the idea of that in the computers. The quality of the energy basically is the battery or the plug, the electrical source. That's where the energy. It's not nutrition on a machine. It's the energy, but you have to have the energy somewhere. So can this energy be used? And I'm not talking mystical energy. I'm talking about literal energy. Can this energy be used to the machine as a artificial biological system where it actually changes itself? Like the food that we take in as our energy changes our body. Proper nutrition gives us a healthier body. Bad nutrition gives us a shitty body. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We know that the human brain is an energy hog. It uses about something like 25% of our calories. But it's a a huge investment for our bodies to make such a big brain. It is, there must be some evolutionary advantage to doing that.
A payoff, basically.
Yeah, there has to be a payoff. Now, the payoff may have been that sexual selection, right? That there was a period of time when it doesn't seem to be around anymore, but when the cleverest guy got the girl, or at least the guy who could speak well, and or maybe it was the guy who was the best drummer. I don't know, but something that's sort of a unique human capability that had to get better was selected for. We don't know why. There's really not that much evidence telling us why. It may have not only that, but our species spread out all over Eurasia and Africa using highly adaptive abilities.
And don't forget the inbred, the need for humans to explore. That seems, which is, I'm guessing, why we went out of Africa to begin with, let alone why we're going to the stars now. We've just got that inbred curiosity. Now, can curiosity be bolstered or in a machine?
I don't know about that. I mean, it seemed like curiosity is something you can get a handle on. The mechanisms for curiosity, you could get a machine to be curious. There's a lot of very active discussion about what that sort of thing is. What this inquisitiveness, the desire to acquire more information about something that just a few minutes ago you didn't even know existed. Right?
That would be a self-awareness.
Is it self-awareness or awareness of your environment?
A machine is our machines are not self-aware. Like my computer with the microphone and the camera, it can't look at me and look at things around me, and all of a sudden I turn on my computer the next day and it doesn't ask me a question because it's just a machine. Whereas a self-aware in any animal, I mean, you could see it in your pets. You can see the curiosity in the cat. You can see the curiosity in the dog. You can, in other words, it has emotions, like Jeff was saying. In other words, if it's going to ask that question, if it's going to investigate something, to learn something, it has a self-awareness.
And then the excitement is the another emotional payoff. Like that, I just learned about this a second ago. Ooh, this is something that I've been interested in for 40 years now. And there's the temporal investment and the the personal investment, and I'm going to explore the heck out of this for the next week.
Yeah, or in the old days, you might have climbed up to a ridge and looked out over a valley you'd never seen before. And you look down there, you see the animals, you see the rivers, you see the all the different terrain features. You say, I got to go figure out what's down there. Right?
How will this make my life better?
It might be better hunting, better fishing, or it might just be a place to live down there. Or it could just be but it's just built in. You just want to see it. You want to know what's down there, right?
What resources can I exploit, and what enemies do I have to now be aware of as well? And they're looking over the other ridge at me, and what are they going to be doing? There's the other end of that stick.
Yeah, well, there might be fear as well. I mean, those things can balance out. Right? You might say, you know what? I see smoke coming up from a place down there. There's somebody down there, right? And traditionally, hunter-gatherers didn't like strangers very much. They tended to get into fights with them. So, and you'll still find that in some places where strangers are not welcome, and other places they are. But let's get back to the question of super intelligence. Is it just being better at being a human intelligence, or is it something else?
No, I think it doesn't matter what animal we're talking about. I think super intelligent would be more intelligent than the average, or somebody who has a lot more neuron passages in their brain, whether it be a cat, a dog, or a human being. It's a higher level. That Einstein might have been considered super intelligent. Hawking might be super intelligent, and there are people like him or them. Whereas I'm not. I'm barely average. I like to consider myself slightly above average, but I'm in all admitting my own undoings. I'm sure that I'm not. I have an ability to ask the questions, but I don't have the ability to do the calculus or anything.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, now when Bostrom talks about the train swooshing through Humanville Station, right? He's assuming the track goes on somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Did we know that?
Yes. Super intelligent artificial intelligences in the future are likely to be orders of magnitude more able to solve problems because they're able to process that much more data that much more quickly. They'd be able to attack problems that we can't even imagine.
Yeah, well,
and solve them.
Well, yeah, narrow AIs already do that, right? I mean, look at the way microchips are laid out these days. They're very large, complex chips, like the i7 in your PC. A lot of that chip layout was done by a narrow AI. It's just too complex for a human mind to get a handle on. There's too many variables.
That's exactly it.
In the old days, they used to be laid out by engineers using traditional drafting techniques. It got very cumbersome very fast, and it was one of the first really good applications for computer-aided design. Was chip layout, and this is back when chips were, a few thousand transistors. Now they're millions and close to pushing billions, right?
Yeah, in a sense, it's already like machines are making machines, because the human eyesight and dexterity is just simply impossible for us to actually make something that small. So we have the intelligence to program a computer to do it for us, and then another machine, which we also invented, puts a million transistors on a little thing that we couldn't, it's microscopic. We couldn't possibly do that by hand.
Well, not only that, but just the design of it, you couldn't do by hand. It's too complex.
I mean, in other words, it's already, in a sense, it's already machine building machine, but it is a pre-programmed, narrow, like you were saying, thing. But if there is ever a self-awareness of any of these things, that's where the danger comes in, and that's the question: will things become self-aware? Is that actually possible?
Why do you think it's dangerous, Patrick?
Well, just like any other animal, we could be dangerous to ourselves. We can, it's dangerous to piss off a lion. It's it's dangerous to approach a hungry lion, for that matter. It's self-awareness. It can go either way. There could be, just like any other animal, there could be good people and bad people. There are evil people and there are good people. If a machine becomes self-aware and the population grows, then you're going to have the same thing. It's going to be a biological system. There's going to be bad machines and good machines, just like any other scary sci-fi out there.
Yeah, once they start developing personalities.
Surely we build in safeguards, like Asimov's laws.
Yeah, but I mean, when you say we, I mean, it could be anybody, right? There's, and for every technology, there's always somebody out there exploiting it or perverting it, right? That's why we have spam bots.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't think we should be afraid of the unknown. People have a natural tendency to fear what they can't understand, to fear the unknown future. And it's not necessarily, having super intelligent machines will be a tool to think of all the science that these machines could achieve. Think of all the things that they could help us with. I don't think there's anything really that we should fear. You could say, oh no, they might take us into a war. We have wars already. We don't need machines to incite wars. We have enough of those already.
As one thing Bostrom was saying that comes along this way that I've seen is that if we don't know how quickly these changes will come about, if they're slow changes, we could have foresight, and because of the seeing things coming, that might be potential problems of establishing such safeguards. We'll have the convenience of time to do that. But if these changes come too quick, we could be blindsided by stuff, and all of a sudden you've got problems that we just don't have the time to fix that just start snowballing with these things too.
That's true. I mean, once machines start designing machines on their own initiative, it's probably too late for humans to exercise much control.
Yeah, there'll become a point where we won't even understand how some of these machines work because we didn't make them.
Right.
Yeah, it's, again, I think Adam's right. We shouldn't be afraid. At the same time, there is apprehension, and I don't think we should ignore the apprehension. But at the same time, it's a hard balance to come across. Of course, all the sci-fi horrors out there that worry about intelligent machines is there to scare us. But that's our apprehension, and it's the writer's apprehension coming out.
Right.
I don't think we should fear something just because we don't understand something. We shouldn't fear it. We don't understand the nature of reality, but there's no need for us to live in fear.
Well, I think there should be a healthy, there's fear, but then there's just the common sense wariness. Wariness isn't fear, but it's a sober I'm going to have to examine this to get a better grip on what's going on, to understand it better, to know if there should be something feared about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the apprehension, the healthy apprehension. I don't remember the name of the sci-fi right now. I listened to it like a dozen times already. Where this one scientist he was working on his computer, and it turns out that he hit the kill switch about 5 or 6 times. Somewhere in the first 2 chapters, it turns out that you find out that he hit the kill switch a few times because he couldn't control the machine or whatever. And then the program decided, wait a minute, how many times have you killed me already? And it became aware. And again, it's another horror story about this whole war starting with machines, and it ended up okay. But it's that the science fiction writer always trying to scare us into being aware of the possibility of self-aware machines. So there's always that apprehension, but we shouldn't be totally scared like the sci-fi writer put us, But it should be self-awareness. It should be an apprehension. It should be, we should be thinking about this. Just like Asimov was apprehensive, and he said, "Well, we're gonna create these 3 laws." So that was a sign of apprehension on the writer's part.
Well, but Asimov, that gave him a rich field of plot devices he could explore by the 3 laws. Most of the iRobot stories involve some problem with one of the 3 laws, or all of them, and some challenge to whether the laws would work properly or not. Those stories are still quite good reading, although the positronic brain doesn't seem to be the technology that we'll be going with. The positronic brain was the magic box, right? The what do they call that in fiction? There's a device that just works, right? And I can't remember that. It's on the tip of my tongue, but what?
Unobtainium.
Well, no, there's a literary term for it, right? So the plot device that you need to throw in that gives you the twist you want. But I love those stories. I've read them when I was a kid, and I just bought my son the paperback copy for him to read. But I think Jeff made an interesting point. There's a hard takeoff scenario, right, where things just get out of control really fast, and a soft takeoff where the problems of artificial general intelligence turned out to be really, really hard to get over the last few hurdles, and we have time to sort of work through how we're going to coexist with these machines, right? Or make sure that they don't find us to be a problem. When I interviewed Robin Hanson about a year ago, we talked about his hypothesized machines called EMS, which are human emulations that are perfect and faster than humans and tireless, don't require sleep, don't require anything except just resources to run. And he says, once these EMS exist, right, and can be, you can make as many copies of them as you want, they will take all our jobs. I mean, because they are basically us, except they're much faster and they don't get tired, and they can do the same job in seconds that it takes us hours to do. So, kind of raises the question: are we concerned about ourselves or our children not being able to make a living? What do you guys think is the likely scenarios to play out there? Are the likely scenarios?
I don't know. I don't know about, I'm not a prophet, but that's hard to say. What the future is going to be so different. I'd like to see a big difference. But I will say, to top off the speed at which these changes happen, I will say this: I think in all the sci-fi, machine scary stories from Terminator through iRobot, the whole idea is that because they are computers, and computers can do millions or billions of calculations in so many seconds, once they do become self-aware, it would be a matter of seconds compared to our hours, or even seconds compared to our days shortly thereafter. In other words, it would be very fast. The minute a computer becomes self-aware, it would be very fast a progression for a computer to change everything. You know, if my computer became self-aware right now, and it's obviously accessing the internet, it would be a sudden, you know, it would, to the computer's self-awareness, it would seem like, you know, a lifetime, but to me, it would be like a matter of seconds or maybe minutes before the whole world just changed because of somebody's one desktop computer became self-aware.
Right. So, but I guess it could happen fast. It could happen slow. Once it happens, though, what happens to us? What happens to us meat puppets? Do we?
Well, we did survive the assembly line.
I'd be delighted if I didn't have to go to work every day. If a computer could do my job and I could stay at home and spend my time doing whatever interests me, that'd be great. I don't see why that should be a problem.
Well, then the people who run the economy might have something to say about that, too.
Maybe my computer would like the way I've been treating it and find a way to deposit a few dollars a day in my account.
Well, you know, as these computers start taking people's jobs, who knows what new industries and new, you know, ventures that only humans can do, at least at the beginning of them, will be created that will fill in the void. You know, like I said a moment ago, we survived the assembly line. I mean, when all that became computerized, we still all have, well, a lot of us have jobs.
Right. Well, you know, that has been a pattern that every time someone says, "Oh, that's going to take all our jobs," that train going down the tracks is going to put all us wagon drivers out of business. You know, well, the train, of course, created vast economic growth and created more jobs, not fewer, right? And as Robin Hanson pointed out, I can't remember the exact numbers, but before the agricultural revolution, about 10,000 years ago, the economy doubled. Size of the economy doubled maybe every 200,000 years. After the agricultural revolution, it doubled every few hundred years. After the industrial revolution in the 18th century, and up till now, it's been doubling. Right now, it's doubling roughly every 15 years. When you get to the AI revolution, according to Hanson, the economy might double every 6 weeks, or even faster. In which case we would go through the whole process, it doesn't last forever, right? It has to, it always goes to some point and then hits the next revolution. That whole process might only be a few years. We might just...
problem, I can envisage problems with between societies that do have such supercomputers and those that don't. It's not going to be a uniform thing across the world, is it? Just as we have the internet in the West, it's not something that's you know, the same all across the world. The third world countries do have access to the internet.
They do. It's getting better.
Common. Yeah. It's getting better. Still not common, and I can envisage problems in the future where societies have high levels of technology and other countries are going to lag behind, and that might cause problems.
Right. Well, but those developed, lesser developed countries still do have access to technology, which gets easier and easier to copy every year. Right? I mean, smartphones are ubiquitous almost everywhere. And
apocalypse.
And they stick up cell towers in poor neighborhoods because everybody has a cell phone.
I'm pretty sure that there are still more people on the planet that don't have access to the internet at the moment that do. We're still in a minority.
Well, we should check that out. That would be a good fact for us to check and put in the show notes. So do you think that
I'm skeptical of that? There was a couple of years ago a pediatrician who was doing some stats on East Africa, which I was interested in because I spent a couple of months hitchhiking around there years ago. And she pointed out that her concern was that it was much easier for women to have iPhones than and internet access than it was for them to get prenatal health care.
Well, it's easy to make a copy of an iPhone, not easy to make a copy of a doctor, right? So,
and it's easier to provide nonstop 24 cell phone coverage once you put up a tower. A doctor requires, regular care and feeding.
Yeah, so you've got the automated machine versus people, and I see a stat here that 60% of the world's population still won't have internet by the end of last year, 2014. A report by the United Nations says 3 billion people around the world will have internet access, but 4.2 will remain unconnected. So we still haven't hit the halfway tipping point on that either.
Yeah, real quick note. The name of the book I was trying to remember is Robopocalypse by Daniel Wilson.
Oh, Robopocalypse. Yeah, I remember that one. RoboCop is different.
Robopocalypse.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. I think that's the one that's got the machine actually hired this contractor to go up in the northern way up north and drill a hole in the ice and drop this thing into this core, and it turned out to be an old I think it was a Russian nuclear detonation test that stayed there, and his people started to die, and it turns out that the robot or the voice that was coming from the secret location was the one giving them the orders, and that was their boss, and they died before they realized what was going on from the radiation poison. But this robot machine ended up being planted into this inaccessible place, and the end of the book was about the people and other machines that were on their side defeating this monster.
Okay. So I guess if we get back to the question of is it possible the world could split into almost two planets, one without super intelligent robots, one with?
I don't know about that. You could have argued easily the same thing about the internet, and that really hasn't completely happened. Like I said, only not even half of the people have the internet, but it's still accessible. And I guess you'd have to measure that. The important thing would be measuring in the terms of how much of a negative thing would that be? How to drive, like how much of a disparate lifestyles would be created between people with the internet and without the internet. I have a job right now where I do a lot of I basically talk to people and do phone surveys, and you'd be surprised at the amount of people in the United States, a lot of them elderly, but that I speak with, and they don't have email addresses, they don't have the internet. A lot of them don't even have computers. I talk to many people in this country a day that doesn't. So, I mean, you've got that kind of encapsulated within even the high-end countries like the United States too, and you don't see really many problems on that end. So how is that going to translate into the AI gap, as you might want to call it?
Well, could people just opt out? I mean, could say, I don't want to live in this world with these machines that are smarter than I am. I want to go, I'll move to Mississippi where there's nothing, where they don't have them. And I
think the world's too integrated for people to have the choice to be able to have isolated areas where this whole area of land is going to have X and this whole area of land is not going to have X. It's just, I don't think that's physically possible. Although with the internet and, that kind of integrated communications, you could have pockets of people that are in virtual areas like that, even though geographically they're all mixed together.
There are religious groups that reject technology, aren't there?
Sure.
Fundamental Christians and Muslims that totally
Amish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Luddites.
It's difficult to predict whether that will become a growing trend, whether some people will reject technology. I guess when it comes down to it, it depends how useful the technology is to us, whether it's something that we find useful or not.
Yeah, I could see wetware really coming up with a lot of religious groups as being a big "I'm not crossing this line in the sand" kind of thing. Sticking silicon in our flesh.
It's funny that Adam mentioned the religious thing, because I've often thought about this. I might have even mentioned it a couple of times in some of the hangouts that I've been in about because a lot of people know me as a hard-nosed atheist. And the fundamental, to me, there does seem to be a divergence of peoples already happening. Forget about the machine intelligence, but with the fundamentalists going towards the dark ages, and the would-be scientist or science enthusiast, or the people that actually get an education going to another direction. And if we ever get off this planet, those people on the dark ages side is going to be left behind.
Yeah, especially in the United States, there's so many people that doubt science in what could be called a platinum age of scientific discovery. Where does that come from, and how is that going to factor in once these crazy, bigger, scarier to a lot of people things, technologies actually come to fruition?
Mm-hmm. But it would be even possible to opt out? I mean, wouldn't these ubiquitous these superintelligence be ubiquitous? Some people would actually have them installed inside their bodies. Could there be a merger between humans and the technology that? And would that be an option for some people to say, no, I don't want to be like that. I want to be 100% meat.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's going to be people already. In fact, we had a guest here. You had a guest here once to talk about implanting to certain. There's going to be people who want or push for that.
Yeah.
If it becomes a mandatory thing, then it's going to be a different society altogether. It's not going to be a free country anymore. How
would it be mandatory? I mean, this sort of thing would be hard to enforce, right?
I would say that they could opt out.
Yeah.
I would say that if it's a free country and everything, you can say, oh, I don't want that thing inside of me. Just like deciding whether to go to the doctor or not. But I think if society moves towards certain enhancements and stuff for physical purposes or whatever, it may become a transitional thing where people have certain computerized things in their bodies to enhance their physical or even possibly in the not too far off future and mental. But if it becomes a non-opt-outable thing, then it becomes a non-free country.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are things that are hard to opt out of, right? Like vaccinations, for example. If you tell somebody, you can't come to school unless your children are vaccinated, or that you might even be charges brought against you if you don't vaccinate, because some of these diseases are extremely deadly.
So I think that would be for the health reasons and for the fact that it is infectious and we have the technology to stop that infection. And I think that could be a law. But if somebody bastardizes that law and starts to make you get these implants like we see on some science fiction, some low budget science fictions, then it becomes a problem. But if it's a life-saving, population thing,
right?
Then, I could see that happening,
I know Nick Bostrom himself, in some videos I've seen of him while I was studying for this podcast, was saying that he doesn't think that as he calls it, cyborg path is a good idea. He thinks it should be the human side of it to bolster intelligence should be all done organically, and like with embryonic research, like making evolution go a little bit quicker. And that there should be a separate avenue that's electronic for machines that would bolster intelligence.
Right, and there are people who are going to want to do as we just mentioned. Tim Shank, who was on a recent episode talking about his implants, which are pretty simple by comparison, but and nobody really knows how to do this. But if you had a super intelligent computer built into you, you could sort of, maybe you could somehow cognitively merge with it. Nobody knows if that's even possible yet, but that would be, and I believe that is really what Ray Kurzweil and a lot of his colleagues are looking for, is that rather than becoming subservient to the new technology or becoming superfluous to the new technology, we become part of it. And maybe that's something we should probably explore in another episode with some more transhumanists, which that's essentially transhumanism or post-human.
There's already work being done on that. There was already that they wired up a monkey's head to the electrodes to control the machine. So there's already work being communicating with the computer to just by thought, literally connecting electrodes to parts of.
Well, one of the people who's done the most work on that has been a guy named Miguel Nicolelis, and he's actually very skeptical that we'll ever have a super intelligent computer. Interesting that the guy who's working most on brain machine interfaces doesn't think we're going to have that kind of machine. But
what are some of the things that he says to give evidence to?
He just thinks it's too hard a problem to solve with a computer, and there are good reasons to think that. By the way, it's not completely a gut reaction. The problems that general intelligence solves are exponentially hard, and so yes, the technology is improving exponentially, but the problems are still, very hard. So some people say, yes, it will happen, but it'll happen quite far into the future because it's just, take a long time.
I could see like the same way that we communicate, like that machine was made where you can communicate just by connecting electrodes. I can see, for example, we have information at our fingertips. Like I can go on the internet right now and just ask a question, Google this, and I learn it right away. But I can see where I might be able to have an implant that allows me to connect just by thinking about it. And it may not actually enhance my literal and physical or brain biological intelligence, but it would give me instant access directly into my brain rather than trying to see it through my eyes and ears. That might be considered as sort of an external hard drive, so to speak, to my own brain.
Right.
Or the nanites that's been suggested that would actually. The nanites that you could inject into your bloodstream that would actually let you hook up to the internet, like you're saying, Pat, just through your thought.
Yeah. Or, essentially what our brains do for us is they sort of model the world around us. One of the things they do. So we have this experience of a world that is living inside our brain. If you had a very sophisticated computer in your that was integrated with your brain, it could greatly augment that. So you could mentally reach out and touch an object in your mind, and you get lots of information about it. That sort of.
You bring up a good point. You'd think it would seem logical to me, the first step in human computer interface to improve our brains is just memory storage.
Yeah. Or access to the cloud, so to speak, where a lot of us have our memory storage these days. I mean, it could be, and it could be so transparent that you wouldn't even be aware of it. I think we're a long way from that, frankly, but I'm sometimes surprised by how quick things move. Sometimes not.
Yeah. Well, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd be unaware of it until things start going wrong, and then you'd have that horrible tech support call that the left side of my body's gone numb. And
did you try plugging and unplugging plugging yourself and then plugging back in?
Yeah, right.
You're like the Matrix. Everybody has a socket in the back of their neck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to take tech support out of the loop for this. For this. Absolutely. The nightmares would be unbelievable. So let's kind of wrap up. We've been talking about this for about an hour, and then we'll get to our recommendations. So each of you gets to recommend something like a book, a CD, a game, a movie, a song, whatever you want. Just if you want to promote your own stuff, we can do that too, but preferably something that's not yours. So let's sort of go around again and sort of get last thoughts on this topic and where we should take it next, and what the big questions remaining for you are. And let's start with Adam.
Classically, an artificial intelligence has to pass the Turing test. And that's a test that Alan Turing devised a long time ago now. I think it was around 1950. So this issue has been around a long time, and I think it's going to take a long time yet before we're there. But I think we are going to have super intelligent computers at some point in the future, and it's something that everyone needs to think about and be aware of. And we need to try and work out what sort of society we want to have in the future.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Buck, how about you?
On the topic of this podcast, I would recommend anyone who's interested and likes Japanese animation to check out a series called Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. It's getting some nods from the panel members. It's being made
into a movie.
Well, the movies came first. The first Ghost in the Shell came out around
new one.
94. Yeah, the one from 2015 is really something. But anyway, I'm going to recommend the series, and if you like the series, which is an exploration by a lot of artificial intelligences, frequently discussing their epistemological status, I think it's worth a look if you're interested in this kind of topic. And it's gorgeously animated, lots of action, and beautiful story writing.
Okay, I should have clarified that we're going to do the recommendations next, but that's okay. So this Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. Okay, I'll have a link in the show notes. Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, aside from recommending the music for that, Kenji Kawai, you could actually catch live concerts from the Ghost in the Shell music. It's amazing music. Aside from that, I would like, since I mentioned it in the entire podcast every day, I would like to recommend those books. Douglas Preston, the Kraken Project, and it talks about the Turing test. And also if you like something a little more scary, the other one that I recommended was Donald Wilson, the Robopocalypse. So those are the two books that, science fiction, by the way, books on the subject that we've been talking about. Those are the two I would recommend. And that music, definitely check out that music.
Okay. Jeff, since you're our new panelist, I'll let you have the last word.
Okay. Well, let's see. The first thing you were saying was if we what we think about the topic in general, I guess. And
yes,
I'd say it's inevitable. Obviously, it's going to be, I think, more things that we can't prognosticate than we can prognosticate, bonuses, problems, and what have you. And we just have to basically cross our fingers and hope that things do go slowly enough that we can control them. And that's my take on that. But as for recommendations, something I've been recommending to people recently, there's a movie I just recently saw. It's a Western horror movie called Bone Tomahawk. It's with Kurt Russell, and it's pretty gritty, but it's really interesting. It's about a group of American Indians that kind of a tribe that kind of went off on their own and started living in this cave and became incredibly isolated to the point of where they just became kind of what they're called them in the movies troglodytes, and very, very brutal and inhuman. And they raid this town that Kurt Russell's character is the sheriff of, and there's a group of people, a posse that goes and rescues the people that was raided. It's really an interesting mix of horror and Western genre.
Oh, okay. And that was just released, I think, in October. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was a recent release. Yeah, Bone Tomahawk.
Okay. Adam, did you have a recommendation before I make mine?
If you're interested in psychology, cognitive science, there's a very good website called brainpickings.org, which is just brain pickings, pickings.org, which covers a lot of very good research that's being done right now. Go check it out.
Okay, it's brainpickings.org. Well, again, there'll be a link in the show notes. I have it up right now, so it should be easy to... Okay. My recommendation is The Frood by Jem Roberts, a book that covers the life and work of Douglas Adams. In a few weeks, we'll be doing a Douglas Adams-centric episode. So that's probably the best book out there covering Adams, since this is Roberts was given access to a lot of the archives, and he has stuff in there that you've probably never seen before. So, and it's quite detailed.
And that's The Frood, F-R-O-O-D, correct? As in one Hoopy Frood?
That's right, The Frood. Yes, and Adams is the Frood in this story, and it's so that's something I would recommend. It's fun, it's lighthearted, and if you've ever read Hitchhiker's Guide or the Dirk Gently books or anything like that, you'll want to check this out. So that's the end of our episode. Please go to unseenpodcast.com to learn more about not only this episode, but all the others. This is episode 35. And you can learn about the panelists that you've met today, plus anything else you want to know about the podcast, how to subscribe and so forth, how to support the podcast. So again, that's unseenpodcast.com. If you have a comment or a question that you'd like to transmit to me or other members of the team privately, you can send an email to unseenpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you have a public comment, you can go right to the blog and comment on the episode itself. We also have a subreddit for listeners, and we also have a new Google Plus community for listeners. Links to all those are on the blog at unseenpodcast.com. So we would really love to hear from listeners and get feedback, suggestions, recommendations, how we can improve the podcast, what facts we got wrong, what facts we got right, and if you want to become a panelist, this is an open participation podcast. So again, send an email to unseenpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know you'd like to be on the panel. We'll tell you how to get started. It's not hard. And I'd like to thank our panel for today. Our first new panelist in quite a while, Jeff Boerst. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.
Adam Synergy Smith.
It's a pleasure.
Buck Field.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And Patrick Festa.
Thank you again for having me.
Again, if you want to know more about the panelists, go to unseenpodcast.com, click on panelists. You can also learn about the hosts. Adam has been a host once. Hopefully we'll do that again sometime. And I've hosted most of them. Also, James Garrison has done one or two. So you can learn about us there. You can also help if you want to give a small donation to help the podcast. We don't recommend very much, just maybe $1 a month or so. you can go to patreon.com/unseen podcast and sign up there. They will bill you automatically every month. Again, we don't think we're the charity that deserves your biggest contribution, but we think that $1 a month or so like that would help us keep going and cover our costs. So we'd appreciate any help there. Again, we'll be back in just a few days. This has been being recorded on December 6th. We will be back on the 11th of December to record again. That'll be on the 12th. That'll be episode 36. We will record again on the 18th of December, and then we will take 2 weeks off and be back on the 8th of January. So we hope to see you then. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, we think that's probably the best way to get the podcast. If you have any questions about how to do that, send us an email. So thank you very much. This is Paul Carr. It is the 6th of December, 2015, episode 35 of the Unseen Podcast. See you next time.
Bye.